Welcome to the Commerce Tomorrow podcast, your one stop to learn about the technology that's powering the future of commerce. Here are your hosts, Dirk and Kelly.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Commerce Tomorrow. Today, we will have an exciting 30 to 45 minutes. It will be definitely more technical than some of the last episodes we had. So this might be more a CTO, CIO episode that we are covering, as we have a great guest joining us today. Welcome, Olaf. Olaf is the CTO and co-founder of Vamp. And of course, with me is, as always, my co-host, Kelly. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Olaf, do you mind just introducing yourself? Where are you doing? So what are you doing? Where are you coming from? And maybe also give us a little introduction about your current startup, your current company, Vamp, and introduce that to the audience.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, first of all. And my name is Olaf Molenveld. I'm from the Netherlands. We're actually located in Amsterdam, a city a lot of people, I guess, know. I have a technical background. I've been working in the internet industry from 95, 96 onwards. Did a lot of programming in the past, then moved to consultancy, architecture, solution architecture. And at some point, we started noticing a lot of traction on companies moving to cloud, becoming cloud native, basically, also adopting what we now call microservices, which was in the past service-oriented architecture, I guess, but with a more modern approach. And then Docker came along somewhere around 2013, if I'm not mistaken. And basically, we jumped on that bandwagon and started building an e-commerce platform called Magnetic.io that was supposed to be microservice and container based. And I guess it was a little bit too early at that point. But we had some cool internal tech that we developed for our e-commerce platform, which turns out to be Vamp, which is our current and only product that we're developing. And I guess we will be talking a lot about Vamp today in this episode. I try to be somewhere in between tech and business. I guess that's my sweet spot. I try to make sense of technology, and I try to explain questions into technical solutions instead of technical mumbo jumbo. I try to make sense of these things and then sit in between. So hopefully I can do that also in this episode.
I think so. And you already,
I'm sure you can.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you have given Vamp already a marketing, well-understanding name, right? Can you quickly explain what Vamp stands for?
Yeah, it started out as an internal joke, actually. It was the very awesome microservices platform, or Vamp. And like I said, we were building this e-commerce platform, and it was based on microservices wrapped inside Docker containers. And as any modern e-commerce platform needs a few cool things, like zero downtime upgrades, A/B testing everything, monitoring observability. And that around the time that we started in 2014, that actually wasn't really there. So we started building that stuff for ourselves. I guess it's kind of like the same parallel at why Docker started. And we started out on Mesos frameworks, and then Marathon came along. And then we started talking at meetups and demoing our platform. And what happened, people were kind of very intrigued about these dashboards and tools that we showed. And we're like, what's this thing that you guys are using to do these service versions, upgrades, A/B testing? We're like, yeah, it's an internal tool. We use it for ourselves. It's a very awesome microservice platform. Joke. Can we buy it? We're like, no, it's not for sale. It's for ourselves. But then at some point, we started thinking about it and said, maybe we need to make this into a product and have other companies that are building e-commerce platforms and tooling to start using this.
Yeah, that's a great story, and it's often how good products are coming to the market, right? So you mentioned Docker. I just have Basecamp as a smaller to-do list tool for companies, right? So when Basecamp came out, I think 37 Signals also developed that for themselves as an agency because all the other project management tools had been too big, and they wanted something else, and then that became their main product, right? So similar kind of story.
Yeah. I mean, it's the best validation, something you need for yourself, and I guess that's also resonating right now in, as we discussed a little bit earlier on. It seems that, let's call it e-commerce, like an online platform that is transactionally based with products you want to sell, is very much interested in these kind of technologies because they need to push the envelope forward. They need to move, and then it really works if that you can explain. Like our background also is Hybris, Intershop, Demandware, big monolithical e-commerce stacks, and you want to move faster with less issues, and you want to start using metrics and data to make sure that what you're doing actually makes sense. So you need tooling around that stuff.
Yeah. And I think that makes perfect sense. When I saw you guys a few years ago, I saw a demo you did actually, and I was pretty impressed with it. Maybe it makes sense just to step back a little bit and explain to our listeners the different types of problems you solve. So what is BlueGreen? What are BlueGreen deployments? How does that compare and contrast with A/B testing, with canary releases? Right. And I guess why does microservices necessitate the need for a third-party platform like this to do these releases?
Yeah. So if you step back and take a look at how typical releases are done, it's often big bang. I mean, you start testing them internally to some point, and then it's basically flipping the switch. If you would compare that to how retailers in the real world would do stuff. Let's say you're a retailer and you want to introduce a new product to your clients. Everybody would call you crazy if you would start maybe developing a new peanut butter taste or version, and then start testing it to a few people, and then put it in every shop in Europe and hope for the best. But that's how in the old days, or even today, a lot of software releasing still happens. And it's not because people don't want to do it in another way. It's because people don't know how to do it in another way. And the moment you introduce microservices into the equation to basically slice up your big monolithical application into smaller parts so you can evolve faster because you don't need to constantly change this big monolithical system, but you can basically slice out a little part, maybe your checkout flow or your shopping cart or your search. You also need something to package this thing. Basically, you can zip it up so you can deploy it into your production service, which is Docker containers. These things go hand in hand. I mean, if you have a smaller service and you can add configuration to it and maybe a runtime engine, you want to package it up and you want to make it uniform over different environments. Basically, you want to solve the DTAP kind of problem where a developer says it runs on my machine, or a tester says, I don't see any issues. And then it goes to production and then everything falls apart. So we early on saw that possibility of Docker, where everybody's talking about developer velocity, but I think the DTAP issue is also a very important thing there, where all your environments are basically identical and configuration is packaged into the service. So you have a little small service that separate teams can develop and iterate on. You have it packaged in a Docker container, so you can deploy it on different environments and it runs consistently. So you have all these possibilities to do that quickly. But then you need tooling basically to quickly move from version A to version B. And if you run a 24/7 global platform, there's no night or day. So you don't want any downtime basically. So that's where we come in with Vamp, which is basically the canary releasing, where you say, okay, I want to move from version 1 to version 2, which we call day 2 problems. So you have your services, they're in Docker containers, you have some kind of CI or CD pipeline. So how to get this stuff into production without any downtime. So you need canary releasing. This is not provided in the technology around Docker. It's not into Kubernetes, it's not in Mesosphere DCOS, it's not in Docker Swarm, because it involves different components of your stack. It involves the container schedulers, like Docker and DCOS and Kubernetes, but it also involves routers, proxies, load balancers. And so you need to coordinate these different components together because you want to run a new version of a service, and then you want to slowly start moving traffic from your clients from the old version to the new version. So that's what we make possible. So you can basically say, okay, I've got this new version running. There's no traffic coming to this new version of my shopping cart. And now I want to send 5% of my German visitors with the Chrome browser to this new version for a few days to see how it behaves. And of course, then you encounter the third problem in this space is how do you monitor and collect these metrics and how do you compare? So that's basically the three components that Vamp brings together. We talk to the schedulers, we configure and talk to the proxies and load balancers for traffic distribution and control, and we aggregate the metrics coming back from these systems and from the services, so you can actually start making sense of how they perform and compare them.
I think that's delivering great value for everybody that is now shifting to microservices. What I wonder, or currently goes through my mind, Olaf, is what are the prerequisites, or maybe let me formulate that differently. What is the maturity level on technology and microservices that a customer that is coming to you needs to have? Let's say they are currently on a monolithic platform, no matter if it's any kind of legacy system or if they have developed that over the last 10 years, JEE stack, very big, and they say, okay, now we want to go to a microservice approach. Do they? Where do they need to be? What do they already need to have done before they switch over to your tooling?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So there's a few dimensions to that question. So there's the technical dimension, then there's an organizational dimension. I think the second one is the hardest, but I will get there in a little while. So the technical things that you need to have in place is that you need at least to have a modern stack where you can run these containers and monitoring them. So in the past, in the last few years, that was kind of hard because you needed to have the engineering capabilities in-house to spin up either a Mesosphere DCOS cluster or a Kubernetes cluster or a Docker cluster. So that was only for like a limited amount of companies that could spend this effort to do that, because you need to configure it and learn it and monitor it. But now we have the managed stacks, so you can run these things. Of course, you need to be able to run or develop microservices, but I mean, that's more like it's a development requirement, but that most companies are quite well versed to do that. What we see is kind of like a hard thing on the technical side is that people are not used to stuff being ephemeral. Basically, it can run anywhere. It can have dynamic IPs and ports. It can scale out. It can scale down. It can move around. So you need service discovery. You need the service mesh kind of things. So these technical things basically are more like a mindset. We often speak to people that say, so how do you connect your services together? How do you make them talk to each other? Yeah, just by IP address. I mean, that's static. So when I move these services around and the IP will change, how do you solve that? We don't. So you have microservices, but they're still statically talking to each other. So if one goes down or moves around, your entire stack falls down. So, I mean, that's kind of like a first step you need to take, that you need to understand that you need service discovery and you need to look up where these services live. And Vamp makes it a little bit easier for a part, because we have a built-in mesh and a service discovery mechanism that you can use, or you can use something that you already have in place. But the more challenging things are in the organizational thinking, where you need to move from a very project-driven organization, where you say, okay, we're going to spend a few weeks or months working on a new version of our shop, of our website, to a more data-driven experimentational organization, where you say, we're going to play shop. So we're going to try out things. We have theories that we want to try out and see how they perform. And we need to have data to compare these things. So how do we get the data out of the services? And this is kind of the level where we're in right now, where people start realizing that it's actually a possibility that you can spin up multiple versions of a checkout flow, or maybe you want to modify the search results a little bit and see what works best for you. And I guess it's comparable to what we saw when analytics started to become really mature, where marketeers were kind of nervous, but they said, okay, so we're going to actually measure what's going to happen on my website when we run a campaign. And we're going to see what the effect is of the money that we're spending. So right now we get to this next level where we say, well, everything we do basically online, we're going to measure and compare and see what the results are. And that's kind of, I think it's a challenging thing for a lot of organizations, because what this actually means is that business needs to get back into the driver's seat and tell IT and DevOps teams what they actually want and need.
Yeah, it's retailers today are not really innovating very well, and I think your product helps to solve some of those issues. And a lot of the retailers that we see out there are releasing to production maybe once every 2 weeks at the absolute best. Many of them release monthly, and I think they need to develop that organizational competency and a culture of releasing quickly, because innovation really does require iteration.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
So stepping back a little bit, when you entered the market, Kubernetes was still a pretty nascent project. It has now, I think, without any question, taken over as the default. I don't think it's controversial to say that anymore. Mesos is also doing well. They just raised a $125 million round. Clearly there are a lot of changes in this container orchestration space, and a lot of these third-party products are, I don't know if I would call it encroaching, but they're releasing functionality that is similar to what you do. So how has your product changed over the past couple of years, and how are you evolving to better support these newer stacks?
Yeah, so our vision has always been, and is still, that we provide business functionality and business value on top of these technical solutions. So the moment Kubernetes came in and started offering more like BlueGreen or canary kind of functionalities, which is probably more into Istio's realm than Kubernetes, because you see different point solutions appearing in this space. We move up also. So we are currently working on deeper Istio integration. We're actually committing to the code base. We're partners with Mesosphere, but we're also very close to the Istio and the Google Kubernetes teams. We try to make sense of all these technical innovations, and when the moment a native API starts delivering a functionality that we earlier on build ourselves, we basically move it out of our code base and start making use of the underlying functionality. So we really sit on top. And I think you can compare Vamp with a thermostat in a sense, in that way, that we basically are a control system for different underlying technologies. We're agnostic in that sense. We have drivers or modules against these different tools. So we can talk to Kubernetes, but just as well we can talk to Marathon or Mesos. And in a short while, we can also talk to serverless APIs like Fargate or Azure Functions, because the reason of existence for Vamp is to provide the business, the marketeers, the e-commerce people with functionalities that so they can easily try out new functionalities and see how they perform and how they compare to other functionalities. Yeah, so we move up basically.
Talking a little bit about customers, what kind of customers do you see mostly talking to you, or who's mostly using your platform? Is it just large websites, more tech companies? Is it retailers? Is it e-commerce? Who's moving fastest, I would say, now the microservices path?
Yeah, we see we call them e-tailers. Let's call them online retailers or e-commerce. They are moving really fast in the sense that they seem to be moving to microservices and containers quite quickly in the last few years. And what we notice and why they're very much interested in Vamp is that they often start moving into more hybrid architectures, which make a lot of sense, of course, because the world is not black and white. It's kind of grayish. And so they maybe have some monolithical backend or like headless solution, which they extend with microservices around it. And then it starts making a lot of sense to apply technology like Vamp for canary testing and releasing. And often in e-commerce or e-tailers, this experimental mindset is more upfront than in more bigger political organizations. The playing shop, as we call it, is more on the surface there. So if everything works out correctly, IT and marketing or e-commerce are already working together more closely. So they seem to be more responsive to this vision that we have, where we say there's a technology layer, you need continuous delivery, which is deploy faster, and at the same time you want to measure how these deployments are actually performing, and you want to do A/B testing there. So that's what we notice. It's often the DevOps team that's working on this stuff and says, yeah, okay, we're moving to microservices, and we want to have automation for our continuous delivery pipelines, but we also want to provide functionality to our colleagues from e-com or marketing to start A/B testing different versions and different color schemes and what have you. So they seem to adopt this quite early on. Financials were also very much interested, but they seem to have a hard time moving from innovation departments into real production. So they're playing around with this stuff, but they seem to be moving more slowly. And we do see a lot of traction and interest from telco and cable kind of companies that want to provide self-service to their internal teams or to external clients where they have a big data stack. Maybe it's Kafka or Cassandra or these big data pipelines, and they want to apply services to consume this data and make sense of it, maybe put it in dashboards or reports. And they want to use the same stack that they're using for their big data stacks. And that maybe also starts answering the question, Kubernetes versus Mesos Marathon. So there's a lot of hype around Kubernetes, but at the same time, a lot of large organizations, some of them we never heard of or nobody ever heard of, they are running big data stacks like with Kafka and Cassandra and Spark and Hadoop in insanely large setups to do all kinds of analytics and data mining. And they historically are running this on Mesos because a lot of these frameworks are Mesos frameworks. And so they are squarely in the Mesos Marathon space. And so it makes sense for them to stay there. And of course, now Kubernetes is also a framework that you can put on top of it. I think Kubernetes will, as one, the API for microservices for the web. But at the same time, there's also still a lot of big data stuff on Mesos stacks. And it will probably converge. It will be used together.
Yeah, I still couldn't believe that Mesos is doing so well as a platform, and Mesosphere as a company just raised that round again. To raise a $125 million round, Series D. I mean, you have to have some really substantial business to support that. But
Yeah, but it's me. I mean, yeah. The thing is, I mean, in Italy, there's like insurance companies that do tracking of car of rental cars, and they run big Kafka and Cassandra pipelines, and they run this stuff on Mesos frameworks. So, and these are maybe not the high profile companies that everybody heard of, the Silicon Valley companies, but they are actually running production with these stacks. So yeah, it's maybe less hypey, but it's probably money going in there.
yeah, right. So the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, it's a pretty big deal, and maybe you could explain that. But I saw that they named you to their Cloud Native ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right. They're famous for publishing this chart of what they consider cloud native. So first, maybe if you could just explain what the Cloud Native Computing Foundation is, where they fit in the market, how you define cloud native, and if you have any thoughts about where they placed you.
Yeah, to be totally honest, we're not an official member in that sense. You can basically become a member and you pay a fee, and then they promote you. You make your logo a little bit bigger, etc. I guess it's a foundation of companies that make tools and software that is kind of like modern. It's built around schedulers and containers and modern cloud infrastructure. So yeah, it's a group of companies that work together in that sense. And of course, it has exploded over the last few months, because I think when we first were mentioned in the landscape, it was quite small, and now it's quite big. And it's only, I think, a year or 1.5 years later. They positions us under service management, which I guess makes sense because we manage services in the sense that you can upgrade them and do the canary testing and releasing. But it has become quite a little bit hard to actually make total sense of this landscape. I think there's so much little areas going on there, and probably in a while it will die out. Some of it will die out. It will converge, and will become a little bit more compact again or readable.
Let's grab this as a chance to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship. You're in Amsterdam. We do business in Netherlands as well, and also have an office over there. So we think I have a little understanding of the market. But you as a native, how is it on starting a company over there? How is it to attract tech talent? What are your growth plans? And maybe talk a little bit about what are your plans for the business? What are the opportunities, challenges, and so on?
Yeah. So of course it's great to be a startup in Amsterdam. I mean, we attract a lot of talent here. I mean, Booking is here, Adyen, Elastic, Facebook, Google. So a lot of international talent is coming in. Work-life balance is great. I mean, you can jump on your bike and then in 10 minutes you're in the office, or just walk around canals. Our offices are in smack in the city center of Amsterdam, which is on purpose because most engineering talent doesn't want to work in some kind of like off-site, boring office. You want to go out for a drink or a nice lunch in the city center. So that's really nice. Of course, as any other company or country, we have our challenges to everybody's looking for great talent. So that's kind of there's always less talent than people are looking for. But I think Amsterdam is not very well positioned. I mean, it's half an hour to the airport. It's very international. Everybody speaks English. Weather is decent. When I look outside, it's not raining, so we're doing well. It's quite easy to move around, to travel. Of course, we're also looking to branch out. So Germany, for us, is an interesting market as it's very mature as e-commerce is concerned. And obviously Silicon Valley and or United States. And my co-founder Herman is currently living there for a few months, so he's doing an insane amount of talks. And I mean, Europe historically is a little bit more, how do you say, a little bit not moving so fast, maybe watching a little bit, sitting on the fence a little bit, seeing how all this new tech turns out, because and in Silicon Valley, maybe companies are a little bit moving faster in that sense. But our ambition is to we already are a global player in that sense, that we have users and clients all over the place: Asia, North America, Middle, South America, Europe. So we want to.
You also support them from Amsterdam, or do you also have a tech team, support team somewhere abroad?
We're currently building up like what we call client or customer success teams in the US. But right now we do a lot of support here from Amsterdam. And as most startups, we have an international team. We're quite flexible in that sense. We work and live over multiple time zones in that sense. So that works out.
And Amsterdam is a great city, right? So for everybody who's listening and never has been there, even Las Vegas can't be a replacement for that. I just, everybody that's in the Venetian things, they have been to Venice, and I can tell everybody that's exactly the opposite is the case. So you need to see the real stuff on site. So it's definitely worth a trip for those that have not been there. Yeah, it's a nice city, right? And a lot of international people, as you said, and everybody speaks English, and Tesla's driving everywhere, right? So that's also it's probably
Don't try to drive a Tesla in the city center. By the way, I guess the roads near the canals are not wide enough to handle Teslas.
And everybody's using their bike, right? So
everything in the Netherlands is kind of walking distance, or at least biking distance. So work-life balance is really nice here. Totally, yeah.
One more question about entrepreneurship, and how's your commercialization model? So is it a product that you sell? Are you more selling consulting services? It's a personal area.
Yeah, that's a nice question. When we started out, we had this vision that Vamp is open core, in the sense that it is an open source, single tenant core. And our initial vision was that this would help us to sell the commercial product, which is multi-tenancy, enterprise-grade security, role-based access control, etc. That didn't really work out. Part of it is that we use Scala and Akka as our core programming stack, which is not as popular in the open source communities as Node or Go. It's a little bit harder to get used to. And basically, Vamp is also more of a platform with a philosophy around it than a little technical point solution. So we're currently moving away from fully open source or only open source solution to what we call Vamp Enterprise, and you can basically, in a few weeks, you can download it as a trial or evaluation version, which has some capping on the number of resources and environments that you can run on, but it's not crippled in any way on functionalities. And then when you need more of the roles or users or environments, you can buy a commercial license. And of course, that's the idea of a commercial company. We are a product company, so that means that we are fully focused on developing and supporting this product. So we provide professional services and service level agreements around it. But our model is not to make a lot of money from implementations around it. We are working with partners, implementation or integration partners that actually use Vamp as an enabler or tool in the projects that they run, which could be all kinds of e-commerce or internet projects that need these functionalities that Vamp provides, like canary testing, canary releasing.
I have a question to that. Do you see, when you look at your customers, most of the stuff being built in-house with their own tech teams, or are most of them working with an agency, or is it a hybrid kind of model that they say, okay, some of the resources we have in-house, but we need to extend our workbench, also get some external knowledge into that and hire an agency for that? What is the main model that you see out there?
I think it's moving to a hybrid model. I mean, the companies that can build the stuff in-house totally, they do. I mean, they are probably very mature. They have lots of technical knowledge. I mean, these are the kinds of companies like Netflix and Spotify and Facebook. So they develop the stuff in-house. And then there seems to be quite a gap, and you get to the kind of companies that have some engineering talent in-house, but they're often overloaded. So, and they don't want to reinvent the wheel, and they are looking for solutions that are developed outside, so they can either themselves leverage, or they can bring in an implementation partner that helps them to set it up. So I believe that in the end it will end up with a hybrid model. You need to have some level of internal capabilities of understanding this stuff, because IT is not going away. You need to have the knowledge, but not necessarily you don't need to build this stuff all by yourself to actually make use of it. So I think it's very comparable to what we saw with content management systems and e-commerce systems and API gateways. First wave, everybody built their own custom content management system or e-commerce platform. And then at some point, people figure out like, okay, why are we actually doing this? This is not our business. We shouldn't do this. We need to offload this to a specialized company. And then, but of course, then you need knowledge of the tool, and you need to integrate it and implement it. So you need either an agency or you do it internally. And I think within the DevOps space and containers and microservices, we are seeing the same thing happening right now. We speak to a lot of companies and say, yeah, we try to do this stuff that you guys are doing with Vamp internally, but we now have a bunch of custom built scripts and it's all over the place, and it's harder than we thought it would be. And we basically stopped it, and we need to figure out a way to do it in another way.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. We're running up to the end of our episode. I have one final question for you, and it's maybe a bit more philosophical, but you've seen a lot of organizations attempt microservices, and clearly not everybody should be using microservices, both because of organizational competency, but also because of use cases. Can you give your thoughts on when somebody should adopt microservices? So both the use cases and what type of competencies are actually required. I guess, when did it make sense?
Yeah, that's a very that's an interesting question. You see it fail quite often. I think you need to run into the limitations of a single service. A monolithical application is basically a big single service. The thing is, moving to microservices is more complex than running a single application, because these services need to talk to each other. Like I said, you have service discovery, you have log aggregation, you have dependency change, all that stuff. So you need to expect that this stuff will be more complex than managing a single application. So you need to have a very strong business case internally why you want to move to microservices. So either you want to scale out over multiple teams that manage separate functionalities, because you're basically blocking there, or you want to introduce different stacks of technology that can work together. But simply adopting microservices and hoping that your release velocity will increase or you will have less issues, that's a no-no. That will not happen. You really need to understand why you hit these limits that you hit and how slicing up your monolithic application into services will help you. And a lot of people basically do cargo culting. They say, okay, we use this Netflix library because they will make us into Netflix, or we use microservices because Facebook is using it. So automatically we will also be Facebook, which is of course.
Yeah, I love the cargo culting analogy. I think that makes a lot of sense. Never heard that one before.
Yeah, you need to understand why you need to use it. And that's the case with everything, I guess. It's an architectural decision you need to make, and it needs to be based on something.
All right. Well, with that, I think we're at the end of this episode. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Very much appreciate it. And
thank you for providing the opportunity. Yeah, thanks, Olaf, and thanks to everybody who was listening to this episode. I would call this episode, now in an analogy, I would call it Vape, a very awesome podcast episode.
That's a great name.
All right. Thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.